Hey guys, it's First Friday at Matheson Associates. I'm Jamie Wacenske.
And I'm Dana Bellingrath.
And we're the attorneys here that you would consult with about all issues regarding family law. Today we're going to talk to you about incorporating separation agreements versus unincorporating separation agreements. But let's face it, all separations are as a contract between two people separating, and we feel like you should know the benefits and possibly the consequences of both. So Dana, do you want to take it away with unincorporated?
Sure. So separation agreements, if you don't know, that's a contract between you and your spouse that would address issues like property division, alimony, and if there are children, it could address custody and child support. When it's a contract just between the two of you, that is what we call an unincorporated separation agreement. So it's not incorporated into a divorce decree. And that remains enforceable then. If there's a breaching party, somebody's not doing what they're supposed to, then the enforcement provisions are that you can sue for breach of contract and specific performance to have a court order them to follow the terms of the agreement. There's some advantages and some disadvantages to keeping a separation agreement a private contract. The enforcement is the big one. How are you going to enforce? If somebody's not doing what they're supposed to do, you have to sue them to go to court. But an advantage of it is that if you, and particularly for high net worth, this may be appealing, is that if you have a lot of your assets and you want to keep the contents of your estate and how you guys divided it, who's getting what, or you want to keep the alimony or support provisions or even your custodial arrangements, if you want that to remain private just between you and your spouse, a private contract keeps it that way, whereas if it gets incorporated, it becomes public record. So that's one advantage to keeping it as a private contract. Another advantage is that when it's a private contract or an unincorporated agreement, it is not modifiable. So whatever the two of you negotiated and you put in this document and agreed on, that's what it is. It cannot be changed. Doesn't matter whether the statute allows it, with the limited exception of custody. And that creates a disadvantage of this. There are some things that if it's not in a court order, after you've spent all this time creating a separation agreement and negotiating terms, there are some things after you've got those agreements, somebody could turn around and go file a lawsuit and pursue it, and that's custody in particular. Custody arrangements in a contract are not binding on a court. So if you put them in an agreement, somebody goes to court immediately and changes it. So what was the point of negotiating that? So that's one reason why keeping that portion of it in a contract is not always advantageous. Another one is that it cannot be modified, which is a pro and a con, because on the one hand, it can't be modified. If somebody gets a higher paying job, the other person can't say, hey, I want you to give me more support and pursue a modification of that when it comes to alimony or child support. However, if you're the person who owes or pays the alimony, you can't, if you lose your job or can't afford it anymore, you can't go to court and ask for it to be reduced. So there's pros and cons for both parties by keeping it private, but it's very particular to your case. So I mean, for that reason, there are some circumstances where it's worth incorporating it into a separation agreement, and Jimmy's going to talk to you about that.
All right, so incorporation into a divorce decree or divorce judgment is a better way to go if you want to make sure that everything you guys just negotiated is going to be enforceable almost immediately by the court. I say almost because time-wise, the calendar might be extremely long, so it may not be between now and then, but everything's already negotiated and the court just has to hash it out, which means the court will follow the statute. It will do what it needs to do to modify it in accordance with the law rather than in accordance with the agreement, like Dana was talking about with incorporated separation agreements. What do we mean by enforcement? In this case, we generally mean contempt. So you can file a motion to show cause if they stop paying for alimony. You can file a motion to show cause they don't divide the property. Same for custody, same for child support. And you guys aren't starting at square one. When you go to court, you've already put the order in. So that also changes the standard for child custody, and it changes the standard for child support, because at that point you would have to show there's been a substantial change in circumstances. So that way you can go ahead and just modify that instead of starting from square one like you would if you kept that a private contract. Contract laws, though, do apply when it comes to the court interpreting what actually went into the separation agreement. So they look to the four corners of the document to figure out what your intent was. However, they try their best to stick with what was actually in the agreement. Once you actually submit the separation agreement for the judge to turn that into a court order, they will, it loses its contractual nature. So at that point, it's no longer a contract between you guys. It is just the whole thing is a court order. Whereas with an unincorporated agreement like Dana was talking about, you have, you can just have the enforcement of one issue or something along those lines. But we don't have that with it, with incorporation. As I stated, incorporation is good a lot for enforcement purposes, especially if you know the other side is really litigious and not going to pay, or not going to follow it, or not going to comply. But again, this is a case-by-case basis because, again, high net worth cases may not want all their business out there. So as it relates to incorporating or not incorporating, again, that's case-by-case basis, like I just said, and you really should consult an attorney prior to putting that language in your agreement or prior to making that decision. We are more than happy to help you with all that. Give us a call at 919-335-5291, and since it is First Friday, we do have a code for you for a free 30-minute consultation. That is INC25. Again, INC25. We hope to hear from you soon.